Hi there and welcome to tonight's webinar. Tonight we're talking about seasonal cleansing for mind and body. We're going to dive into why cleanse, what is the toxic load, where are we getting this toxic load from, how does that show up in your body, and all of that good information, as well as diving into, okay, what can we do about that? What is cleansing all about? And some tips around how to carry out your own cleanse for this spring. So officially welcome. My name's Annemarie. I'm a holistic nutritionist. I have a degree in medical science, and I'm also a certified yoga and meditation instructor. So I like to come at different aspects of health from this really holistic whole body sense, looking at the science, looking at the intricacies of the physiology of the body, while bringing in this piece about the mind and movement and mindset, and how really all of that physiology, mindset, movement, it's all affecting the same organism in the same way. If you work with your mindset, you're going to affect your physiology. If you work with food and nutrition and affect your physiology, you'll also help with mind and mental health as well. So that's kind of what my approach to health and wellness looks like. And tonight we are diving into cleansing specifically. So from that framework, looking at cleansing. So here are a few questions we're going to be answering tonight. Where do toxins come from? How do toxins affect my body? And how to do an intentional cleanse. So lots to dive into within those three questions. And let's just get right into it. So before we actually talk about cleansing and then how the body is affected when we take on this toxic load, I wanted to start off by setting the stage by looking at these 6 stages of illness. And this is a guideline or a principle that comes from Ayurvedic medicine. And I've started with the end stage here. So we're going to work our way up just to keep you in suspense. So the 6 stages of illness, the end stage, the 6th stage is what we know as the terminal stage. And this is where this is a full-blown illness where you are needing pharmaceutical intervention, maybe surgical intervention. But this is the kind of final manifestation of a disease or an illness state. And this is where we usually end up seeing our doctor and getting help from there. But as the number 6 is alluding to, there's several stages before the terminal stage that we can look at and start to work with. The stage before the terminal stage is the stage where we're getting physical symptoms. So these can be things that, we tend to ignore, long-term fatigue or aches and pains, or, you're feeling a little off, but that's just become your new normal and you just kind of write it off. So those are the symptoms that are trying to warn you, right? They're trying to say, hey, something's off. Let's take a look at what's going on here. And if you don't address the symptoms, then that's when it can progress into the 6th stage of the terminal stage. Before these symptoms appear, there's often an accumulation of toxins in the body. And that's where this really plays into our chat tonight around cleansing and toxicity, is that oftentimes it's this accumulation of toxins that is driving the body to then start to produce these symptoms. And what comes before that? Some sort of metabolic imbalance. So this is where usually your body is able to take on toxins, work through them, conjugate them, and get them out of the body, no problem. But what can happen is when there is too much of a toxic load, then the liver becomes overburdened, which we'll talk about. The pathways of detoxification become overburdened. And this leads to some metabolic imbalances, which causes the body to then start to accumulate toxins rather than be able to move them through. And these top 2 are the really interesting ones here. So what comes before a metabolic imbalance? Lifestyle. This is where food, nutrition, movement, your sleep-wake cycle, how much time you're spending in the sun, how much time you're spending with movement. Your entire lifestyle is the basis for making sure that your internal environment is functioning properly. When you're eating foods that support your detoxification organs, when you are moving your body, when you are practicing these lifestyle things that support your body, then you're going to be able to take on that toxic load, have the liver function properly, clear things through, and we won't get to this point of metabolic imbalances. And what comes before lifestyle? Number one is mindset. Your lifestyle is an offshoot of what's happening in your mind and your mindset. That is where your lifestyle is being predetermined and where your motivations lie, and the execution of that mindset is what underlies your lifestyle. So in this 6 stages of illness model, it's a really interesting way to kind of go all the way back to the top and say, you know what, one of the most important things to look at when it comes to health and wellness is mindset. And after that is lifestyle. So if we can address mindset and lifestyle, then we can prevent this kind of accumulation as we go on. And that's something that we'll be talking about tonight. We'll be talking about this place here where there's metabolic imbalances happening. We'll be talking about once there is that accumulation of toxins, those symptoms that come up from that. And we're going to back it up, and we're going to do our best to catch it before it ever gets to that point. We're going to look at lifestyle, mindset, and this use of a cleanse to help us restore the body of its balances. So daily toxic exposure. So where are we getting these toxins from? There is kind of a laundry list here of places where we're getting this daily toxic exposure from. And it's really just the way that our society operates, just our day-to-day lives. There's so many places where we're picking up these different toxins. So beginning with air pollution, contaminated water from factory runoff or from farm runoff, agricultural runoff. Plastics that's a well-known one, right? So BPA, a lot of us have heard of, and it's been in the news a lot, this estrogen mimetic that seeps out of BPA containing plastics and enters into the food or water or liquids that are contained within those plastics. Electromagnetic fields. The human body has its own electromagnetic field, and we are constantly surrounded by all of these other ones, right? Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. It's really hard to actually get away from electromagnetic fields. So that's having an impact on the body as well. Medications, not to say that medications are bad per se at all, but that is something that anytime you're taking a medication, it's your liver that then has to go through the process of denaturing or removing that medication from your body. And the more medications that build up, the more work that liver is having to do. And it's important to note that it's an accumulation of all of these things, right? Our livers, our bodies are really well set up to be able to handle a toxic load. But it's once these things start to stack and stack and stack and stack, that's when we have a problem. Personal care products is another place where you may not think of it, but there are a lot of different fragrances, chemicals, things that you put on your skin are absorbed right into the body. So all of these products that contain questionable items that can be adding to the toxic load in your body. Dental fillings, of course, the mercury in there, smoking and alcohol, food choices. This is a place where, over the last 100 years, we've moved away from more, working with the land and actually having whole foods, and more towards these processed foods filled with artificial flavors and sweeteners and colors and all of these unnatural things that our bodies aren't familiar with and don't recognize. And so when we're taking that on, that becomes another source of a toxic exposure. And when it comes to our produce that we're buying, pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, these are laden over our conventional produce. And there's so many things that that causes an issue within our body when it comes to glyphosate, which is Roundup, which is what's sprayed on those crops. But in terms of what we're talking about tonight, just the toxic load that simply comes from ingesting that glyphosate is what we're going to focus on as what's causing an issue. Food packaging, again, the last 100 years, it's been that we've kind of developed this new way of transporting and selling food in plastic packaging. So that's coming back to that plastic piece as well. So many places that toxins come from. And if you are just a human living in society today, then these are things that we're all exposed to, unless we are really, really mindful about that exposure, doing things like trading out personal care products for ones that meet some certain standards of toxicity and lowering that toxic standard. Electromagnetic fields, a good practice there is turning your Wi-Fi off at night. So just giving your body a break from that electromagnetic field. And if we're mindfully making food choices around moving towards more whole foods and away from that processed food industry, making intentional choices around organic so that we're moving away from that pesticide, that heavy pesticide spraying. There's very mindful choices that we can make to move away from this toxic exposure. But the reality of our lives today is just that there is a general underlying toxic exposure from living our lives as we do. So I don't want to spend too much time on this slide, but I think that it kind of speaks for itself that yes, there's a lot of areas where we are gaining this toxic exposure from. But what I think is more important is what do we then do about it? And before we get to that, another place that we often don't think about this toxic exposure coming from is on an internal level. So within your body, stress, the fight or flight response, when you're chronically stressed, that is having a negative effect on the body and stressing the body, leading to oxidative stress, inflammation, all of these things that translate in the body to a heavy toxic load. And then these ones are interesting: emotional baggage, negative thoughts, limiting beliefs. So these things that we think of as psychological or, existing up here, they are having a real serious physiological effect on the body. Whether that's through, even a single negative thought, speaking to yourself negatively, negative self-talk, that will trigger your fight or flight cortisol response, that stress response within your body, then increasing inflammation, oxidative stress, and all these things down the line. Limiting beliefs, emotional baggage, all translate again through that stress response to a physiological effect in the body. So as we go through this, and as you kind of learn these tools to start to formulate your own little cleanse, keep this in mind that even if we are addressing things from a nutritional perspective, from doing some movement, that type of thing, we're still just at that second level, right? That lifestyle level on that 6 stages of illness. If we really want to get to the heart of healing and health and wellness, it's taking that next step and addressing at the mindset level, listening to that self-talk, rewording what you're saying, questioning what you're hearing, becoming a witness to your thoughts, and starting to really train your brain to go down another alley rather than falling right into that negative self-talk. Taking a step back, just hearing what your self-talk is saying and saying, okay, that's one way to think about this, but here's another alternative. And we'll dive more into that as we go along too. So moral of the story here is that everyone has a toxic load. And like we said, there are really good systems in place in our bodies to be able to work with a toxic load and take on toxins and clear them and have no symptoms or metabolic imbalances come up. But you can think of this toxic burden like a glass filling with water. And as that glass fills with water, or as your body takes on more and more and more toxins, eventually that glass gets to a point where it overflows. And now your internal detoxification systems can no longer keep up with the pace or with the onslaught of toxins that your body is taking on. And that's where we see issues begin to crop up. So that's when it would become translating from a metabolic imbalance into more of the symptomatic and heavy toxic load place. So what we want to do is we want to catch this before the cup ever overflows. And a seasonal cleanse is a perfect way to do that. So once a year, springtime is a great time to do it, and we'll talk about why that is. But once a year, maybe twice a year, sometimes people do twice a year, but even once a year, mindfully supporting your body's detoxification systems, removing foods that are adding to your toxic load, adding foods that are going to support your body. And doing this even one time a year can help to keep that cup from overflowing. And if the cup is overflowing, then it can just even help this to support the body and reduce some of those symptoms that are coming up. So what happens when the cup overflows? The liver is the main guy we're going to be talking about tonight. And he or she, the liver, is the place where toxins are taken care of, denatured, conjugated, and moved out of the system. But that's not all it does. It does so many things, and that's what we're going to dive into in the next couple slides here. But when the cup overflows, when that toxic load hits that point where the liver and detoxification organs can no longer keep up with the rate of toxins that are coming in, the liver becomes overburdened and it becomes sluggish. An important thing to note is that the liver is the metabolic conductor of the body. We'll dive into more of that means in the next slide. And when it's overburdened, its other tasks are compromised. So what other tasks are compromised here? The liver is the metabolic conductor of the body, meaning that it's responsible for energy storage and expenditure. It's the one who's pulling the strings and taking care of what's being stored, what's being used for energy, and making sure that those conversions are happening at a proper rate. And when it becomes sluggish and slow, it can lead to fatigue, because now it's no longer able to keep that energy storage expenditure level up at the same pace that it was before. And so that can feel very fatiguing. Another thing that the liver controls is your blood sugar levels. So when it's overburdened or sluggish, this can lead to blood sugar instability and other conditions down the line. If we go through that 6 stages of illness, blood sugar instability itself would be a metabolic imbalance. But as we move forward further, symptoms of hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia, diabetes, that would kind of be where we would go long term. The liver also is responsible for the formation of lipoproteins, blood proteins, all of these internal communicators that affect so many aspects of health. So one aspect is calcium absorption and bone density, water balance, which we're going to touch on tonight too, why water balance and specifically cellular hydration is so important, blood clotting, it's moderating free versus bound minerals and hormones that are in circulation, so active versus inactive. So this is already beginning to paint this picture here that the liver is so important in the body, and when it's not functioning properly, so many other pieces fall to the side or start to become out of balance. The liver is also the primary excretory organ for many hormones. So let's say, for example, estrogen. When the body has used estrogen and it wants to now get rid of it, it's the liver that conjugates it, makes it into an inactive form, and excretes it through the bile. If the liver is overburdened because of a heavy toxic load, it's not as good at doing that. And that's when we end up in this place of estrogen dominance, which is something that maybe you've heard of, contributes to a lot of PMS and menstrual cycle symptoms. And so that's super important. If the liver isn't properly conjugating and removing those hormones, it's becoming a hormonal imbalance and affecting the endocrine system. The overburdened liver also can't conjugate those toxins properly, right? So this cup is overflowing, there's too many toxins. And what happens in a normal circumstance is that, the toxins enter the liver conjugates them, denatures them, makes them into an inactive form, and secretes them into the bile. The bile is stimulated when you eat your meals, and it moves through the body and is excreted through the colon. But when we're in this overburdened state, there's toxins that aren't being properly conjugated, but are still being released into the bile. So these active toxins are now released into the bile. The bile is stored in the gallbladder. So this can really irritate the gallbladder, cause a lot of inflammation. The last point on this slide here is relating to the immune system. So the liver has certain cells that contribute to immunity. And if it's overburdened, then the liver isn't as able to function in that way. It impacts your immune system, and it can heighten allergic inflammation because of the way that those cells work within the body. And lastly here, an overburdened liver strains other portals of elimination. So if the liver isn't properly taking care of toxins, these toxins are overflowing and ending up in these other areas in the body where we're eliminating. So the kidneys, the lungs, the colon, the skin, and that manifests as skin issues. So eczema can be one way that it shows up, irritable lungs, swollen lymph nodes, chronically swollen lymph nodes, a chronic sore throat or ear infection, dysbiosis in the colon, so an imbalance of good and bad bacteria. So that was a lot to go over, but the general gist is that if the liver isn't functioning properly, then you're not in a good place, because everything that we talked about goes back to the liver, and that liver needs to be functioning well. It's like the manager of the body, where it's telling everything what to do, how to do it, when to do it, making sure everything is in its right place, in its right balance. And when it's not functioning optimally, that communication breaks down and all of these things start to go awry. So perhaps you're at the point where you might be experiencing some of these symptoms. And depending on the body that this is happening in, different symptoms might be arising. So in a young woman, maybe it's the estrogen dominance. That's the main physical symptom that she's experiencing when it comes to PMS or things like that. Maybe fatigue is the main way it might be showing up for you. It depends on where you're at, but potentially there could be some symptoms coming up from this. And this is an interesting thing to note here as well. So we're really focused in on the liver here tonight when we're talking about cleansing and detoxification, because that is the place where cleansing and detoxification happens in the body. And when we look at traditional Chinese medicine, things are broken down in certain ways. And without getting into too much detail, spring in traditional Chinese medicine is the season of cleansing and rejuvenation. It's the time of the liver. And traditional Chinese medicine describes the responsibilities of the liver as ensuring smooth movement of qi energy throughout the body, which is that vital life force. If there is a stagnation in the liver or an overburdening or a sluggishness to the liver, that life force then can become stagnant. And doesn't that explain or mimic the exact things we just talked about that we know on a very physiological level, that if the liver is stagnant, X, Y, and Z down the line is going to have issues. So in traditional Chinese medicine terms, they're saying that this qi, this vital life force energy, is becoming stagnant. What's also interesting to note is that the liver, when it comes to an emotional point of view, the liver holds the emotion of anger. So sometimes this manifestation of this qi stagnation or this sluggishness of the liver can manifest in this emotional anger, in this irritability, and that can be another cue that your body is needing some support, that your liver is needing some support, and that this is the kind of perfect time of year to do that, because this is the time of year when the liver is most active, during the spring season, during the season of cleansing and rejuvenation in traditional Chinese medicine. So that's the thought process behind why cleanse in the springtime, and also pulling in that emotional piece around anger, irritability, frustration, and how those types of emotions can relate to liver health. Okay, so I think we've set the stage now to understand that there is a heavy toxic load being thrown at us every day just from our natural living environments, and that toxic load has an impact on the liver, and a serious one, and that the liver is something that we really want to support and make sure is functioning well. And so I wanted to outline tonight a spring cleanse approach. This is something that you can take and create your own kind of cleanse with. Usually 10 days or 14 days is a good way to do a nice spring cleanse, but choose what would work best for you. We're going to talk about nutrition, we're going to talk about hydration, movement, and mindset. So between those, we're ticking off, that first stage when it comes to the stages of illness. We're going to look at mindset. And then the second stage around lifestyle will be ticked with the nutrition, hydration, and movement. So when it comes to the nutrition piece, what would you want to eliminate if you were doing a springtime cleanse? Anything that is going to stress your liver. So all processed and packaged foods, refined sugars, artificial sweeteners, gluten, dairy, alcohol, caffeine, fried foods. This is not an exhaustive list, but if you can remove these, then you're already doing so much to support your liver that your liver will be very, very thankful. And this is only one side of the puzzle. So what are we eliminating? And then what are we adding in is what we'll address next. But when it comes to processed and packaged foods, it contains all sorts of food additives, preservatives, colors, flavors, things that aren't found in the natural world, but have been created in a lab. And our bodies do not recognize these things. They aren't then broken down and absorbed as vitamins or minerals or nutrients. They are going to be shipped right to the liver to be conjugated, to be excreted, and to get them out of your body. When it comes to refined sugar is sugar where the fiber has been removed. And in nature, sugar coexists with fiber. It's always surrounded by fiber. And that fiber allows the body to slowly absorb the sugar. It acts like a net and holds on to those sugar molecules so that when you eat, let's say, an apple, it's full of natural sugars, but it's also full of fiber. The body has to pick through that fiber and slowly absorb sugar molecules. Oh, there's one there, we'll absorb that. Oh, there's one there, we'll absorb that. But when you remove that fiber, such as in refined sugar, you are just absorbing that sugar super quick. So you eat that refined sugar, your body doesn't have to pick through any fiber. It just goes, oh, sugar, great, let's absorb it. And all that sugar ends up in your bloodstream, where it is super reactive and very dangerous to have high blood sugar levels. Your liver and your pancreas respond and get that sugar out of the bloodstream, but they often overshoot, and then you get a hypoglycemic state where your blood sugar then drops. So you're doing this sugar roller coaster when you're really consuming a lot of refined sugars. Artificial sweeteners, again, that's just a compound that is not natural, not found in nature, and is taken on in the liver as a toxin. Gluten and dairy are very inflammatory foods. So sensitivity varies between people, but even for the 1 or 2 weeks when you do your annual spring cleanse, if you can remove gluten and dairy and just allow your body to operate at this lower inflammation place, it can be really, really helpful to just give the liver some time to kind of catch up. Alcohol and caffeine. Alcohol is very inflammatory as well. It's inflammatory to any surface that it touches in our body, so our entire GI tract. Caffeine stimulates our cortisol response. So it puts us into that fight or flight state, which is a place that is very stressful on the body and stressful in the physiology of the body. So removing caffeine so that we're not getting jacked up into that fight or flight state is important. And fried foods. When you fry oils, it changes their molecular composition to become, again, very inflammatory. It moves from a potentially healthful food like an olive oil and turns into something that is no longer healthy. So what to eat? And this is really coming back to basics. It's thinking about, how have our bodies evolved over the last thousands of years alongside nature? How have our bodies evolved, and what were we eating while this body was evolving? So coming back to the basics, right? High quality protein, healthy fats, gluten-free grains. On the next slide, we'll go through fruits and vegetables, and really keeping that idea in your mind. What does our bodies recognize, right? 100 years is a blip in terms of evolution. Our bodies have not caught up with this processed food, standard American diet that we've been pumping into our bodies. Let's go back and think, okay, what would my body, in an evolutionary sense, recognize and be able to break down and absorb and utilize? So starting here with high quality proteins, organic, hormone-free, wherever possible, chicken, turkey, lamb, grass-fed beef, wild-caught fish, and some vegetarian options there, organic tempeh, legumes, eggs. Healthy fats, raw nuts and seeds, or avocados, coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil. These are all really good options when it comes to healthy fats. Healthy fats are so important for us in our body's functioning. They are the building blocks of hormones, of our cell membranes, of our brain. So healthy fats are so important. Fats have gotten a really bad rap over, the last couple decades. And I think that's starting to turn around and people are starting to recognize that. But just as important as thinking, okay, where am I getting my protein today, is thinking, okay, where am I getting my healthy fats from? Gluten-free grains, so removing gluten and focusing on some gluten-free grains, your brown rice, quinoa, gluten-free oats. These guys are all really good sources of fiber, which we'll dive into more in a minute when we talk about veggies on the next slide here. So organic vegetables are listed here. And this is really important when it comes to that glyphosate or Roundup or pesticide load that we're all taking on a daily basis from the foods that we're consuming. Doing our absolute best to choose organic where possible, looking at the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen from the Environmental Working Group. It's ewg.org, and they have these lists that they come out with every year, and they do pesticide testing on all of our range of fruits and vegetables that we have in our supermarkets. And they come out with a list of the ones that are highest concentrations of glyphosate and pesticides, and then the ones that are lowest. So when it comes to that Dirty Dozen that are highest in pesticide residue, choosing organic every time. And when it comes to the Clean 15, not worrying so much. When it comes to that glyphosate load as well, I just would like to briefly touch on some research that's coming out around not only the toxic load that we take on from consuming glyphosate, but the effect that the glyphosate is actually having on the fruits and vegetables that it's sprayed on. When a fruit or vegetable is sprayed with glyphosate, it's inhibiting its ability to create some of the essential amino acids that we need to get from our foods. So it's having an effect on that plant on a biochemical level, and it's inhibiting certain processes that are needed to create certain molecules. And of those molecules, we're talking about things like tryptophan, tyrosine, and these are the building blocks of our thyroid hormones, of our serotonin, our melatonin. So these are really, really important building blocks that we need to be eating and are being destroyed in the foods that are being sprayed with glyphosate. That's a whole other rabbit hole that we could go down. But when you're thinking about buying organic, know that that is a part of that driving force behind buying organic vegetables, is that these conventional vegetables are potentially depleted in those vital building blocks that we need to have proper mental health when it comes to serotonin, proper sleep cycles when it comes to melatonin, proper governing of our bodies when it comes to that thyroid hormone. So something to definitely keep in the back of your mind when you're weighing, whether or not to purchase that organic vegetable. When it comes to vegetables themselves, these guys are so full of phytonutrients, fiber, vitamins, minerals, all of these guys that really, really support the detox pathway, antioxidants that are going to help to support the liver. And this fiber is what I wanted to touch on here too. When it comes to those gluten-free grains, full of lots of good fiber, and also these vegetables full of lots of good fiber. And that fiber does so many good things for us. When it comes to this piece around cleansing and detoxification, that fiber, we don't digest fiber. Fiber moves directly through our system and ends up in our colon. And in our colon, that's where our good gut bacteria live, and they love fiber. This is what feeds them and keeps them proliferating and doing their jobs, which are producing vitamins for us, secreting different molecules and chemicals that support the colon and support brain health and support all of these other pieces of balance as well. And in the colon, that's where that fiber is going to hold on to the bile that was secreted by the liver that contains those conjugated toxins. And so that's how we are truly moving toxins out of the body, is through that fiber that's going to hold on to that, move it out. And you'll remember that we said that when the toxic load overflows and the liver is no longer able to make sure it's conjugating and denaturing these toxic chemicals, that these active toxins will sometimes be secreted into the bile. Same thing with active hormones. Sometimes the estrogen is just secreted into the bile and it's not conjugated, not denatured. And if this bile, if these toxins aren't bound into this fiber and moved through the body, they will get reabsorbed. And so the liver then has to take it on again. So this fiber piece is important in holding on to those toxins, moving them out of the body, and also in the fact that it helps with those bowel movements, keeping them regular, making sure that things are continuously moving. The last thing we want on a cleanse is for the bowels to stop moving. And that is where that toxic load then just gets reabsorbed back in, and we do not want that. So making sure that we're getting lots of fiber, and the pair with the fiber there is the hydration as well, which we'll touch on. Organic fruits, low glycemic options preferred. So berries are a really good low glycemic option, low sugar, high fiber, and again, full of all these phytonutrients and antioxidants and fiber, and these things that really do support the detoxification pathways. And when you're looking at condiments, keeping it simple, again, back to basics, lemon and lime juice, All your herbs and spices are a good option. Vinegars, mustards, they're good as well. Where you would run into trouble is when you open up your fridge and you have your ketchup and your barbecue sauce and your salad dressings, and they contain all these refined sugars, maybe some funny oils and that type of thing. So coming back to basics and working with what you have that is coming from kind of more of a whole food source. So let's move on and talk about hydration. Hydration is a requirement during cleansing. Like we said, keeping the bowels moving, making sure everything is exiting the body is of paramount importance. And part of that equation is the fiber. The other part of the equation is the water and hydration. And what's interesting here is that it's not about how much water you're drinking. It's actually about how much water is absorbed into your body. So much of health and wellness is hinged on the actual cellular hydration within your body. So how well you're driving that water into your cells and the state of the water when it's in that cell. When it comes to cleansing, it's really the focus that we'll put on here is making sure that we have enough water to be able to be hydrating the colon and making sure things are moving. And what's interesting is that we actually absorb 2/3 more water from vegetables than we would from a glass of water. And that is because of a few different things. In nature, in fruits and vegetables, there are different components that are happening within the cell. So there's minerals, there's other things that are allowing the water within those cells to be structured in a certain way, the same way we want the water in our cells to be structured. So when we eat fruits and vegetables, we're getting that water with its natural minerals in this structured state, already pre-made, and that we can absorb into the body really easily. The other piece is that in vegetables, again, we have the fiber. And so that fiber is able to hold on to those water molecules. And again, your body kind of comes through and picks through like a net. Oh, there's some water, let's absorb it. Rather than flash flooding when we just drink a glass of water and your body goes, oh, we got to get rid of this. So a common myth is that, if your pee is clear, you're well hydrated. All that means is that your kidneys are working well and it's getting water out of your system. It's not an actual indication of your cellular hydration levels. So some principles of cellular hydration, and especially when it comes to cleansing and in day-to-day life, water is one of the places where we pick up a huge toxic load. So just regular tap water contains all sorts of things, heavy metals, runoffs from prescription drugs, runoffs from agriculture, and things that we just do not want in our bodies. So one of the number one tips when it comes to maintaining a low toxic load, number one is looking at your water that you're drinking daily. And then number two would be making sure that you're purchasing organic wherever possible. So if you can do those two things, you're going to minimize your toxic load in a huge way. So when it comes to what type of water to drink, we want to look at distilled or RO, reverse osmosis water, as kind of our gold standards. And in both of those, we're removing everything from the water. So all that remains is that H2O, that water. That is not the natural state of water. So we have to actually add minerals back in so that our body is able to recognize and absorb that water into the body. So if you're drinking RO or distilled, that's great. You're not taking on that toxic load. But in order to encourage that water to actually enter the body and be absorbed, we need to add minerals back in. So that can be mineral drops. We have some here at the clinic, or even as simple as sea salt, a pinch of sea salt in every second cup of water you're having a day. The second point here is eat your water, your fruits and vegetables. So like we said, you're absorbing 2/3 more from a fruit or vegetable than you are just from a glass of water anyhow. So thinking about getting in your cucumbers, leafy greens, celeries, apples, these really water dense fruits and vegetables, but really any fruits and vegetables will help there. And then the last point here is move your body. Our bodies are hydraulic pumps. So when we are moving, when we're walking, when we're exercising, we're pumping our muscles, we're pulling on our fascia, and that movement is driving water into the cells. And that's the perfect segue to movement. So the next point here, we went through nutrition, we went through hydration there. Now we're on to movement. As you're doing your cleanse, and again, kind of as you move forward with your life, this is another good principle to incorporate, is aiming for 30 minutes of movement daily. Walking, yoga, rebounding, high intensity interval training, or, weight training, anything that you feel called to, that you feel is enjoyable. Doesn't need to be intense though. Even 30 minutes of walking is beneficial. So you can spread those 30 minutes out throughout the day. You can wake up, go for a 15-minute walk, and then, 15-minute walk on your lunch break. And that is still really meeting those 30-minute requirements. That movement increases cellular hydration, right, like we just said, reduces stress and improves mindset. And also it's pumping your lymphatics. You can think of your lymphatic system as parallel to your circulatory system. So your heart and your blood that moves through your body. But your lymphatic system, its job is to take cellular waste and move it to be excreted. And it also helps to move the immune system around the body. And the heart is what's pumping your circulatory system. But what pumps your lymphatic system is actually muscular contraction. So when it comes to this idea around cleansing, getting this movement in can be really important to make sure that as your cells are kind of dumping toxins and you're moving some toxins through your body, that you're actually able to pump that lymphatic system, get it moving, get things out of your body. And that takes us to our last point on the cleansing recommendations, and it's mindset and stress. So you'll remember that at the very beginning of the 6 stages of illness, we had mindset, and mindset is what translates into our lifestyle. Lifestyle is what translates into our metabolic imbalances, which then leads to our toxic overload, which then leads to symptoms coming up, which then comes to that end stage kind of disease state. So if we back it up the ladder and we start at mindset, there's so much that we can do to then influence our health down the line. So what can we do with our mindset that will help to regulate our lifestyle and have all those benefits that come from that? So doing any type of mind-body exercises are going to help to reduce the stress state in the body, to shift that stress physiology in favor of that more rest and digest. So things like yoga, meditation, mindfulness, breath work, spending time in nature is a really great one. And that's a really great place to tune into when you are thinking about the difference between this stress state in your body and this really nice relaxation state. So if you can think about a time that you went for a walk or a hike or a jog in nature, and maybe you went in and you were feeling that stress, that rapid pace of thoughts, maybe that rapid shallow breathing, that's just kind of our day-to-day breathing. And then if you can imagine yourself at the end of that walk, how things have changed, the pace of your thoughts have slowed and maybe come into the present moment rather than thinking about the future or the past. Your breath quality has improved, you're breathing deeper and getting better, oxygenation into your body. That is the difference between that fight or flight state and that rest and digest state. The mindset challenge that's listed here is what we were talking about too. And it comes to this idea that even something as simple as a negative thought or negative self-talk can trigger that fight or flight, that stress state in the body. So beginning to identify those thought patterns, our thoughts and our mental processes are something that's programmed into us over time, starting a lot in childhood. And it just becomes kind of the lens through which we see the world. This is just the end all be all. This thought is how things are. This is how that is. And we come into these routines of when I am met with this challenge, this is the route that I go down. This is my mental process. So maybe it could be something like, oh, you made a mistake at work. And your immediate reaction is, I am so stupid. I should be able to do this by now. blah, 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 and down the line. And that's just your end all be all. That's your response. I'm just an idiot, and this is all my fault, and I'm so dumb. But what if you could take a moment and take a step back, create a little bit of space, and just see that thought, take a witness stance and see that thought and that information just kind of playing through your mind, and go, okay, what if you took a step back from that and said, hey, you know what? I've been working really hard today, and I accomplished so much, but you know what? I worked through my lunch, so maybe I'm feeling a little tired and a little hungry. Yeah, that's probably why I made that mistake. It's not the end of the world. You know what? I'll come back to it tomorrow and I'll fix it. No big deal. So you can see how there's different ways to start working with situations and different ways to approach yourself. And this idea of mindful self-compassion comes into play, where that voice in your head should be your number one cheerleader. And oftentimes we are so far from that it's not even funny. But it's true. You need to have a voice inside of you that is supporting you and pushing you towards taking good care of yourself, rather than saying, this is all your fault or whatever it is. So I would challenge you, as you set up your makeshift little cleanse, to be really mindful around that. Notice as these thoughts come up. And especially around food, it can be a big one. As you're making some dietary changes, as you're trying to incorporate different things, there can be a lot of resistance in the mind. And maybe there's going to be some things that are really hard to give up, like maybe refined sugar or cheese, or these things that we tend to feel more addicted to. So listening to that self-talk as you get into these situations of wanting to have this, or, I should be able to do that, listen to those conversations in your mind and start to offer alternatives. And the more that you do offer those alternatives, the more that your mind will have that neuroplasticity and create those new neural networks to say, hey, actually, no, let's go this way. Let's have this conversation rather than that one. And it's a practice, and it's something to really work on, because again, like we said, mindset is the number one place where we can work to avoid these negative things occurring in the body down the line. And the last point on here is practicing gratitude daily. And this is something that there's actually so much research out there on, and people who practice gratitude are happier. And that is just a fact. So a few ways that you can work with gratitude. It can be a morning practice where you wake up and you jot down, okay, 3 things that I'm grateful for. It can be something that you set an alarm for on your phone, and, midday, you just stop, drop in gratitude. You get that alarm and you go to your notes and you write down, okay, in this moment, I'm grateful for this coffee and this, whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be anything big. It can be just whatever in that moment you're grateful for. And that, again, is helping to reprogram the mind towards seeing these positives, towards grasping onto that gratitude. Because we all have what's called negativity bias, and the mind and the body, which is so programmed to protect, tends to see the negative, tends to see what could happen or the negative aspects of things, because it is trying to find anything that might be a potential threat. So we actively have to practice things like gratitude to tell the mind and program the mind to move towards more of that positivity, towards seeing that abundance rather than tending towards that negativity. And by implementing any of these things, anything here that might have resonated with you, you're starting from that root, working with the mindset, which then translates into lifestyle. If you can talk positively to yourself and have your own back, then maybe there's certain lifestyle things that you'll start to support, like, hey, yeah, I'm, feeling good. I'm ready to do my workout, or I do want to take good care of my body by spending some time preparing this meal. It's all a trickle down effect, right? So the more you can work with the mindset piece, the more other things in life fall into place, and the more beneficial it can be. So I just want to spend a couple minutes here touching on some further cleanser support. So oftentimes people will use some supplement support or some herbal support to further help cleanse. We touched on really just the nutrition aspect, moving your body, meditation, hydration. All of those things will have a really great beneficial effect. But there's a few other things that we can do to help support that as well. And this is a tea that I really love. It's the Glow Tea from Wild by Nature. It is a tea that is formulated with all of this digestive support. So all of these herbs that are really supporting digestion, soothing inflammation in the body, and having a really great effect to support the liver as well. It's a plant-based collagen support, which is silica. So silica is the building block of collagen. But what's really interesting is that silica is really great for helping with that cellular hydration. So this tea is helping with the hydration piece. It's helping the digestive processes here when it comes to cleansing. And it can be really good to pair this with those other lifestyle changes that we talked about. And this tea is available at Functional Medicine Uptown. The website is wbnbotanicals.ca. So Wild by Nature, wbnbotanicals.ca if you wanted to check it out there. The other tea from them that would be really great to support a cleanse is the rooted tea. And this one has all sorts of anti-inflammatory, antioxidant compounds in there. And it's a really nice coffee replacement. So it has rooibos, it has ginger, turmeric, sarsaparilla root, and chicory root, with this roasted chicory root that makes it have that nice depth of flavor and feel really nice and soothing. So as you go through and you're removing caffeine, this can be the perfect kind of replacement when it comes to morning times, making yourself a cup of rooted tea that's going to support your detox or cleanse while also kind of replacing that coffee in a nice way. And that brings me to the KW cleanse. So starting not next Monday, but the Monday after, we have the KW cleanse going down. There's a ton of people already signed up and registered, which is so exciting and awesome. But this is something that's hosted through Functional Medicine Uptown. I'm hosting it. We have a bunch of webinars to support the cleanse itself, which I'll be hosting. It's a 14-day cleanse, and it's kind of embodying everything we talked about tonight. So it comes with a meal plan, comes with all the recipes to support it. It comes with this veggie cleanse powder, which has a ton of different things that support detoxification in it. It also is supported by this Well World app, which is really cool. And it gives you this opportunity to track these lifestyle changes that you're changing. And when it comes to lifestyle changes, accountability is key. So being able to track it on this Well World app is really, really cool. It also has all the recipes in that app. It has daily meditations that come out from that app. So many aspects of what we've covered is embodied within this 14 days. And to break it down a little further here, like we said, it's 14 days, April 26th to May 9th. Comes with the veggie cleanse powder, access to the app with all the meditation, meal planning, wellness tracker. There's also gratitude prompts that come out throughout the cleanse, daily motivation and cleansing tips, private Facebook community, these live group Zoom calls where we kind of break down the what and why and how of cleansing even more, and a nice little gift basket draw at the end too. So if that is something that is appealing to you, please register. The cost of the program itself is $147, but there is an early bird coupon on until Friday at midnight. So tomorrow at midnight, and it's early bird 10. And the other really cool thing is that the first 50 registrants are getting the Wild by Nature rooted tea. So this one that we just talked about, a full-size tea for free when you register. And if anyone has any questions about the KW cleanse, please feel free to either jump on here and let me know, or you can send me an email, let me know. The registration itself actually ends on Sunday. So this early bird promo goes until Friday. Sunday is the cutoff. And And then next week is when the supplement pickup happens and registration for the app happens and all of that good stuff. And the last thing I wanted to leave you guys with was just a thank you for joining me, is this 7-day spring cleanse meal plan. So if you join us for the KW cleanse, this is a meal plan that you can just pull some recipes from as well. If you want to kind of dive into cleansing on your own, you could use this alongside some of those teas that we talked about. This is kind of a build your own adventure here. So take whatever aspects of this sat with you and really resonated with you. Start to play around with the idea of maybe a 10 or 14-day cleanse. And if you'd like this little recipe booklet, I'm going to send out afterwards an email with a link where you can grab it from. So thank you. Thank you for joining me tonight. I hope that information was valuable to you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. My email is here, Annemarie@embodywellness.ca. And have a great rest of your evening.